going to jail for it, like where their guys going like, this is the most anti-life, anti-strength philosophy ever conceived, trying to take away the survival instinct of these humans by teaching them that it's wrong to treat your dog as the master that you are by beating them when they disobey. Like, I really wonder if something like 70, 80 years ago, you could find that sort of mentality about that moral change.
I was watching. I started watching Boondocks recently. You remember that kind of hip hop centric?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds like something Uncle Ruckus with black people would probably. He probably fit the bill for that.
Mm-hmm.
That show is wild.
Black people lost their integrity when they stopped beating their dogs.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah, so I figure we just watch this just to mix things up a little bit.
This video
pretty good, pretty goddamn good
vehicles
video.
And self-driving cars. And you should know that I used to be a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed idealist on this topic, and in some ways I still am. And some people would even call me a fanatic. In fact, let's go check out my car collection. I own a 2023 Model Y with full self-driving data. And this is my 2024 Kia Carnival van that has a custom installed self-driving computer that runs open source software. And man, we are truly living in the future. And if autonomous self-driving vehicles make you uncomfortable, it's so much worse than you think it is. So let's just put on auto drive and plow right through this fucker. Oh my God.
This video is so fucking good.
Mad as savage, me back and I'm back and it happening, ready to blow. I remember doing deeds with Deji from the street, they left me on my own. Monkey asking me about how I got the P, I told her leave him mum and grow. Then they're ringing off my phone, then they're ringing off my phone.
In 1992, while the rest of us were marveling at Bill Clinton's saxophone skills in Windows 3.1, affluent Japanese drivers were marveling at the Mitsubishi Debonair's ability to tell you if you were leaving a lane or about to hit something. Within a few years, nearly every luxury car manufacturer would release something similar, but it wasn't until 2004 when Toyota's Crown Majesta would actually nudge you back into your lane using steering correction should you drift out of it. The first decade or so of steering correction wasn't too great, as drivers would often find themselves ping-ponging between lanes, but these days most cars have adopted some type of lane centering and also smart cruise control, which keeps you up to speed with traffic rather than just a speed that you set into it. There are currently 6 levels of vehicle autonomy, or 5 levels. It really depends on who you ask, since this isn't really a formal standard, but generally, stage 0 means manual driving. There's no automation with the exception of things like emergency brake assist or electronic stability control. Stage 1 means that there's one automated control, such as lane keeping assist or adaptive cruise control. In stage 2, there are multiple driver assist systems at work, such as lane assist and adaptive cruise control. Despite what marketing campaigns might have you believe, stage 2 is as far as we've gotten for consumer vehicles in the USA. You are still required to keep your hands by the wheel and pay attention at all times and be ready to take over instantly. Stage 3 is when you can kind of do something else, like watch a movie or text on your phone. The only clear laws I could find made about stage 3 are in Germany, and you must be able to intervene or take over the car within 10 seconds of a warning. Stage 4 is where the driver can take a nap or not be present in the vehicle at all. This is where vehicles like Waymo or Cruise robotaxis claim to be when spending millions of dollars on lobbying. In my opinion, no legitimate stage 4 vehicle exists on public roads. Stage 5 is where the vehicle is designed with the intention to not have a driver at all, so there probably isn't even a steering wheel or pedals. So where does Tesla fit into all of this? A decade ago, in 2014, Elon Musk said that Tesla's full self-driving will be 10 times safer than a human driver by the year 2020. In 2015, he said that we'll have full, complete vehicle autonomy by 2017. In 2016, he said that within 1 year from then, you'll be able to drive from LA to New York without ever having to touch the steering wheel, and the car will automatically charge itself at charging stations on the way. So if you lived across the country and wanted to buy one of my guitars, theoretically, I could just put it in the back seat of my Tesla and have my Tesla deliver it to you. Awesome. A year later, when 2017 happened, Elon Musk said that you will be able to sleep in a Tesla while it drives you places by the year 2019. And in February of 2019, he said, and I quote, "We will be featuring complete full self-driving this year. The car will be able to find you in a parking lot, pick you up, take you all the way to your destination without an intervention this year. I'm certain of that. That is not a question mark. And that's not all. He also promised that by 2020, you'll be able to let your Tesla drive strangers around overnight on the robotaxi network and make up to $30,000 a year in supplemental income. Wow, it seems idiotic to not own a Tesla. And now here we are in 2024. It's like a real life live action Jetsons. All of those things totally happened, right? Right? Tesla's full self-driving beta is stage 2. It's lane centering and some smart adaptive cruise control with a lot of confidence. I'll just be driving along like this, and then every 10 seconds or so, I'll get a message that says, apply slight turning force to wheel, which is my favorite, least stressful thing to do when barreling down an expressway at 70 miles per hour. Don't worry, baby. Autopilot's on. But just the random occasional occurrence of phantom braking and sudden acceleration and steering wheel jerks and things like that make me realize that the big difference between a stage 2 Tesla and a stage 2 Nissan or Hyundai or Kia is just confidence. When an Ioniq or an EV6 hits a sharp curve or a situation that it's uncertain of, it leaves the decision up to the driver. Now, when a Tesla encounters uncertainty, it will confidently. I'll show you an example. As most men in their 40s do, I bought a plastic child and then tried to hit it with autonomous vehicles on a closed roadway. And guess what? Despite what you may have seen in videos like this, the Tesla actually did rather well at avoiding the child when it was barreling down the road. And I decided that this experiment was a success and cruise controlled it over to the prop and camera stuff. With cruise control still on, the car braked for the child, stood stationary for a bit, and then suddenly accelerated over the child and sped up until I manually braked and took over. Oh my God, it just mowed down the child. Yeah, what the fuck? I lifted my orange plastic boy back up to his feet and I tried approaching him at a moderate pace. The car recognized the child in the road, braked a bit, and then decided, meh, it's fine, and then drove over it. Here's a really, really painfully obvious question. When a car detects a humanoid object and says, hey, there's a humanoid object, I'm gonna brake for that, and then the car brakes for it, why in the world would it not suspend full self-driving and have the human take over? Like, a car should not ever accelerate from a stop if it thinks that it just detected a pedestrian in front of it. What the fuck? And it's not like this is some type of anomaly. A few days before that, I decided to actually test out full self-driving in public. It tried to drive me into the side of another car in a Kroger parking lot. I decided to stop testing it in public and brought it to a closed lot. And even in that closed lot, I probably had to disengage to prevent a collision over a dozen times. And when I was filming in public the entire time, I thought to myself, this is actually really dangerous. Why am I filming myself driving this thing in public? I'm gonna get canceled. But like close to 400,000 people are using this exact shitty system or an even older and shittier version of it on public roadways. And a whole lot of people, from Elon dick riders to Tesla investors, are really defensive and full of shit when any sort of claim about full self-driving safety comes up. In fact, last year when The Independent published footage of a Tesla hitting a child mannequin in a controlled test, not only did Tesla threaten them, but Hallmark's catalog argued that full self-driving cars can detect the difference between false pedestrians and true pedestrians, and then literally asked for somebody in the Bay Area to volunteer to have their child run in front of his Tesla to prove it. And sure enough, just when you think that you can't possibly hear anything stupider than the paragraph that just came out of my fucking mouth, in a now removed YouTube video, Tad Park, a private equity CEO heavily invested in Tesla, decided to volunteer his child to play Russian roulette with full self-driving beta.
So far, so good. But what about with real life kids?
The car refuses to move.
Okay, it's moving a little bit. It's moving a little bit.
Let's set it to 40 miles an hour, just like Dan O'Dowd's test.
And thank God it didn't do to his child what it's done to mannequin children in tests. Okay, honey, daddy is balls deep on an option ETF for one of Elon's broken promises that daddy's also hedged with Bitcoin. I'm gonna need you to go help daddy out and go stand in front of the 4,000-pound self-driving vehicle that's being beta tested. There's been tons of both formal, well-funded research and independent research from concerned Tesla owners. AI Addict, for example, has set up all sorts of test scenarios on private roads, including, but not limited to, fooling Tesla's driver monitoring system with stuffed animals and even an inflatable bottle of champagne while plowing through a closed road sign and also plowing through a moving child mannequin walking its dog. And just like in my experiences, a lot of the time the Tesla will detect a pedestrian, brake, and then be like, nah, it's probably fine, and go on to commit vehicular homicide and a hit and run. The reason some of the old autopilot running over children tests are safer than others isn't that complicated. Most fully autonomous vehicles, or vehicles that claim to be fully autonomous, use LiDAR sensors, which is like a pretty foolproof real-time 3D scanner. Elon Musk thinks that LiDAR sensors are far too expensive, so he has relied on just using regular cameras and ultrasonic sensors. Ultrasonic sensors are a tried, true, reliable way to detect nearby objects. They're used in everything from collision warning systems to parking assist systems to rear occupant alert systems. Come to think of it, the last time I had a car that didn't have any type of ultrasonic sensor on it was like 20 years ago. They cost like $50 to replace for the consumer, and they cost as low as $4 to make for the manufacturer. This expense was apparently too much to ask for a $40,000 to $50,000 vehicle, because last year, despite the overwhelming advice to not do this from Tesla engineers, Elon removed the ultrasonic sensors from all Tesla models coming after about mid-2023 and replaced them with 1280 by 960 resolution cameras. Like, I actually tried to find a new webcam that was on sale that was shittier than the Tesla cameras, and it took some real effort. And you will never guess what happened after Tesla removed the ultrasonic sensors. Crashes increased. Like, who could have predicted that other than all of the Tesla engineers who predicted that? In fact, Auto Park Summon and Smart Summon are not even available on this vehicle. Like, today, a year after I leased this vehicle and paid for these features, they are still listed, advertised, and sold on Tesla's website for this model of car. But if you're like most people and think, well, surely they can't just boldly advertise something and sell people something that doesn't exist, then you're wrong, because they do, and nobody seems to give a shit. Despite really regretting leasing a Tesla, I'm still a huge enthusiast for this technology, and am both personally and professionally very involved with emerging AI applications. Right after this here video is done, I'm driving thousands of miles in the US and Mexico for a giant documentary project I'm working on, and I have a luxurious, sexy 2024 Kia Carnival travel van. Actually, let's go hang out in it. So being a professional musician for 2 decades, who toured, who utterly hates flying, means that I have spent a staggering amount of time sitting in a car traveling across country. It would usually on average be between 18,000 and 25,000 miles per year. And for reference, the circumference of the entire Earth is just under 25,000 miles, which is not as big as the circumference of my Zur, the star in Ursa Major. So way back in the day, in the early 2000s, I'd drive from like Chicago to LA in a straight shot because I was a broke musician. I didn't want to spend the money on a hotel room. And obviously I would have a lot of coffee and energy drinks and things like that. But there was this period where I discovered this little stay awake hack, and it was microdosing on LSD. And I feel like anybody who's never taken acid before is just reeling back in horror from hearing that I was taking LSD while driving. And anybody who has done acid before, or especially microdose, is probably like, oh, that's pretty clever. So in 2017, I was finishing up like a 5-week tour, and I drove from the middle of Iowa to the middle of Georgia. And that's like a 16-hour drive or something, but it was nothing that I've never done before. And I woke up in Tennessee somewhere to the sound of my SUV banging as it was going off of the road into the grass in the center of an expressway. Fortunately, I didn't hit anything but plants. The SUV didn't even roll. I managed to get off the expressway safely and go rest. But it was right then when I decided that the next time I drove anywhere out of town on an expressway for more than a few hours, it would need to be in a vehicle that had lane departure warning, lane keep assist, and a driver alertness monitoring system. And that's worked out very well for me since then. And it turns out that that works out very well for everybody. So PARTS, or Partnership for Analytics Research and Traffic Safety, published what is probably the most complete and unbiased research one can find on driver assist systems. In vehicles made between 2015 and 2020, it turns out that lane departure warning and lane keep assist reduce the chances of an accident by about 9%. If you think that's cool, it turns out that forward collision warning in combination with automatic emergency braking reduces the chances of you rear-ending somebody by over 49%. And overall, it seems like if all of these things are enabled, you're 19% less likely to be in a collision. That's 1 out of 5 accidents prevented. Not bad, right? So what about Tesla? Well, it depends on who you ask. Elon Musk has and will repeatedly tell you that Tesla's full self-driving is much safer than human drivers. And if you believe that, you need to get your head checked. Now, according to insurance companies, Tesla owners get into 22.54 accidents per 1,000 drivers, making it the most accident-prone make of vehicle. Although, to be fair, the insurance companies did not publish their methodology, and I do think there's a strong possibility that these are lazy stats that didn't account for the overall amount of vehicles on the road to find an overall average, as the 3 safest makes are defunct manufacturers. But I do love a deep data dive to find an answer. And according to Elon's own words in an April investor call, there have been 150 million miles driven with full self-driving beta, which would average out to about 375 miles for each of the 400,000 cars that purchased it. If you're to weigh that against the 736 full self-driving crashes and the 17 fatalities reported in this time period, that's 11.3 deaths per 100 million miles. So now in comparison, last year human beings averaged 1.35 deaths per 100 million miles. Now all of this is rough math, since the NHTSA hasn't even required companies to report autonomous crash data until 2021. But when the rough math indicates that full self-driving beta is over 10 times more dangerous than humans, it's pretty clear that the CEO that constantly lies about everything is lying about the safety of his own controversial technology. This popular misconception of, well, actually, autonomous vehicles are safer than humans, it requires you to imagine the worst driver you encountered in the last week when, in fact, despite the amount of frustration we feel on a day-to-day basis when commuting, humans are actually pretty badass at driving. Look no further than those giant crazy intersections in Africa or Asia, and then imagine a bunch of Waymo robo-taxis trying to figure that shit out. I bought this particular make, year, model, and trim of van for reasons other than the super sexy burnt orange seats. It supports something called OpenPilot, which is a project that was initially founded by George Hotz, who otherwise is known as the pesky teenager who jailbreaked your iPhone or allowed you to have open access to your files on your PlayStation 3. Seriously, that's the same person. George has been critical of Elon Musk and Tesla's full self-driving and other self-driving startups for quite some time, to the point where I believe that he had a dartboard with Elon's face on it. But imagine this, instead of just making a long YouTube video bitching about it in a van, he actually tried to make cars' self-driving systems more accessible and open source. The newer higher-end Kia models can be equipped with LiDAR sensors from Kia, and they also have plenty of ultrasonic sensors, as they already have really good lane centering and collision prevention software. So I installed a Comma, which is a computer that runs open source software that communicates between your car and the already existing safety or autonomous driving computer in it. So on one hand, the reason I'm doing this is fueled entirely by my anxiety and need or at least to feel safer when driving on a very long road trip. And so far, so good. I think that I do. But on the other hand, I've torn apart a new car to circumvent the safety system, which, when I say it that way, sounds like the dumbest thing I've ever done. Time will tell. If you're expecting this video to turn into a commercial for Comma AI or anything related to OpenPilot, it's not. I actually had a rather underwhelming experience with the company. The overall production and research of this video started in September of 2023, and it was supposed to be out by last November, but Comma sent me the wrong harness. I really needed advising on how to get this running and sort out the orders, and I was advised to post on Discord or Reddit. I'm not going to get into it, but more or less I just kind of got roasted. Then you have to pick out and install the software yourself, and pick out the fork and the version, and then pick out the trained model to use depending on the version that you're using. And if you have any questions, just join join the Discord and ask other users, because what could go wrong with that? I'm going to stop there and just say that if you don't know what you're doing or personally know somebody who knows what they're doing, you're not going to exactly breeze through this. So anyway, in OpenPilot, there's a chill mode and an experimental mode. And the chill mode of the main OpenPilot repo is only marginally better than my Kia's own driver assist system. And the experimental mode is arguably worse than Tesla's full self-driving beta, as in I don't feel comfortable testing it on public roadways, and I think it should not be allowed for use on public roads by anyone. We just hit a fucking... God damn it. But if you're wondering, just like the Tesla, it both successfully dodged and successfully murdered my orange child in my testing. Oh. I spent an absurd amount of time trying almost a dozen different forks before deciding that chill mode on a rather specific fork of Sunny Pilot with some deep setting adjustments was pretty much the perfect level of assistance, AI competence, and driver alertness monitoring for me personally. And hey, you know what? After driving across the state a few times and putting a couple 100 miles on it, it's good enough to be worth the $1,500 for the added safety and convenience for my 10,000 plus mile documentary shooting road trip that I'll be on in a few days. And if the van drives itself off the Grand Canyon or something, it's been good. So as somebody who drives a Tesla that has the full self-driving package and somebody who also drives a travel van that has been modified to be capable of full self-driving, I am not remotely close to being comfortable using full self-driving on either one of those vehicles on public roads. And I'm frankly not comfortable sharing roads with people who rely on them as long as the marketing and liability are at odds. And what I mean by that is that if I enable the full self-driving software that I paid extra for, and I don't know, it causes an 8-car pileup on the Bay Bridge, then it is my fault for not paying attention and not being able to take over immediately in however many milliseconds I would have had to do so to prevent an accident. Well, then, to state the obvious, it's not full self-driving. It's not autopilot. It's not autonomy. And honestly, it's a little bit simplistic to blame Elon Musk or anybody getting rich off of this space, because under no circumstances should a company like Tesla be allowed to put these things on public roads or sell them without exhaustive independent studies passing various stages of methodology. We have government agencies for that, and they're not doing their job. But that's how you take a step forward in science and technology. And I realize that I probably sound like a Tesla Karen or something, but I'm actually pretty optimistic that if we put a hard stop on this short-sighted adoption of autonomous vehicle technology, it will actually help move transportation technology along faster. If you want to get really excited about what transportation might look like in the future, then we need to think about autonomous vehicles entirely differently. Hear me out. Come on. Using what is referred to as BOIDs, which was an artificial life program from 1986, one can make a pretty impressive autonomous BOID with less than a few dozen lines of code. It can explore on its own, it can avoid obstacles or collisions, and it can find a route to a destination. It is AI, but it's hardly what we would consider AI by today's standards. There is no neural network or even any machine learning involved. When you start placing a lot of BOIDs together, and tell them to head in whatever direction they want under the sole condition that they don't collide, it starts looking a lot like those crazy intersections in Vietnam or Meskel Square in Ethiopia. But when you start to tell them to all go in a particular direction without colliding, something really cool happens. It starts looking like a school of fish, expanding and contracting to allow new BOIDs in rather than making them wait to merge. When you add in a whole lot more BOIDs to that, they start creating a sorting algorithm that immediately gets more complicated than any single program a human can create. You start observing things that you'd see in fluid dynamics. The BOIDs start looking less and less like vehicles staying inside lanes and more like water molecules heading down a river. Spending all of these resources trying to make a 2-ton vehicle detect a stop sign in the rain when that stop sign was designed for humans is not futuristic or visionary. If, and this is a huge if door-to-door self-driving vehicles ever become safe to travel without supervision, they'll be traveling from point A to point B at about the same speed and efficiency that we have been since 1920. Wouldn't it make so much more sense to segregate human drivers and autonomous vehicles to their own lanes so autonomous vehicles didn't have to work around all of the human errors. We could just throw those out the window. They could be tightly networked with other vehicles in an open system, and it would reduce things like traffic jams, because when a car wants to merge in, it could just contract like a school of fish and let it in. You wouldn't need to
They'd also be able to draft off of each other and get better gas mileage.
Yeah, for sure.
recognize traffic lights, because there won't need to be traffic lights, because traffic lights are signs for humans. And more importantly, and obviously, passenger safety of the system would be designed and regulated by the Department of Transportation. Not this guy, not any CEO or company. You've paid.
I disagree with this guy at that point.
Well, what you have then is you have smaller jurisdictions, states, if they're small enough, or subdivisions of states, if it's something like California, contracting with private firms to develop these automated roads and the vehicles that run on them, so that if one firm is doing a bad job, not according to voters in the inefficient system of voting, but according to customers in the efficient system of choosing to pay for the service, then say that subdivision of a state, all you need is competition between.
Industry agrees to use, which is obviously something like that technology he was just talking about.
Yeah, standards developed around railroad gauges at a time when there was substantial true competition among a dozen major railroads, railroad companies.
They knew that tech was fucking better than what they had, so might as well use it.
Yeah, there wasn't a problem of everybody using a completely different gauge in the 1800s.
And then they electrified it, so if any of them disconnected, then alarm would sound, and there were a bunch of cool.
Yeah. So you can have competition in these things. You know, there's a space between just having roads and then everybody being a complete individual in charge of their unregistered vehicle version of libertarianism.
Leaving it all to the Fed, though.
And one standard for all of society that's run at the highest level of government. there's design space between that, and it's sort of heavy competition between contractors for efficient public transportation.
Well, what the dude said about like, this will be my responsibility if I use this shit, like, that's kind of how it has to be, like, everyone should be taking that into consideration and being like, well, is this worth it, for me to experiment with this technology and maybe kill people? Probably not. Maybe I should just drive my own damn car.
What's really good at handling risks like that? Corporations. with stocks. They can bear those sort of shocks.
They don't like losing
still
money.
Having a strong incentive to care. Individuals can't do a very good job at that. As an individual, you're just going to say, oh crap, I can't survive if I don't use this thing, so I'm just going to use it and cross my fingers. If something happens that I'm responsible for, tough luck, because there's no way I can pay for it. That's the case for most individuals, even who we'd call relatively wealthy individuals. They their use of technology is going to carry potential risks. It doesn't even have to be high technology. I live in the mountains where there's serious forest fire risk. I know some people who I describe as pretty wealthy. Not a single one of them could even begin to pay the cost of forest fire if they were to start it.
Well, what's crazy is I lived in Central America and everyone just burns their land at the same time. And everyone in the neighborhood gets together and helps everyone control the fire. And they do that every year, and they never have gnarly fires.
Yeah.
It was the funniest thing, because I was there for when it happened, and I was up 16 hours one night helping, keep the fire moving along and not getting too big and taking out anyone's houses and stuff. And it was like rad, but like full on like anarcho firefighting. You know, like we didn't need any firefighters. We just needed a bunch of people and with their shovels and people that have enough sense to know that they shouldn't let certain areas overgrow. You know, around LA every year we have crazy fires. And I just watched them ignore everything again, and then crazy fires happen, and people die, and they use it to scare us. They use it as an example of why we need to pay taxes. You know, it's pretty wild. But yeah, the self-driving stuff, all that leads into it. Like the stage 4 self-driving is you don't have control over where you go anymore. You know, and like this dude's ushering that shit in. And it's just like, maybe we don't need to go in that direction.
You know,
and
so the
it's going to be
advantage.
weird. It's like there's going to be like hyper technological areas, and then there's going to be like people are going to be like the less technological areas are going to be like more sought after. It's going to be like weird. Like we're going to, as humans, need to vacate these highly technological zones or something. If we go that direction.
Well, it's kind of like what he was saying. There needs to be like a separation from the self-driving cars have their own highway or whatever, and then just the normal streets made for humans. Because that's what he was saying.
Well, then you don't have cars anymore. You just have trains and subways, and that's always worked.
No.
We don't need to change what we've been doing. You know, like these pods, these like space Tesla pods. You're just gonna get in your pod and it's gonna take you to work. Like, dude, that's old Star Trek stuff. Like, that's not, and it's not being done now because it's not needed. You know, like the same reason we don't need a bullet train going to Vegas. You know, like or to San Francisco. You can literally get on a plane and get there faster than that train because that train's gonna have the same amount of security a plane's gonna have. So it's like all these. And California's already spent billions on that idea. You know, it's just like there's just numbnuts up here. And these numbnuts like Elon Musk are pushing this stuff and they take our tax dollars like for it. It's wild. But me and Allie almost got hit by a Tesla, and it seemed like the self-driving stopped it because it scared the shit out of the driver because it took over control from the driver.
He tried to speed around us, and it just slammed the brakes on him, and so you could
Yeah,
just see he was surprised.
almost hit on the
Which
windshield.
honestly, it could have caused an accident if someone was following too close behind him. They would have rear-ended him because it just braked for no reason, non-driver controlled. It seemed, but it was just kind of funny as a cyclist just seeing.
Like we were legally riding, and he tried to get around us, and the car stopped him. We were like, "Whoa, that was actually pretty cool."
He didn't do too close of a pass, but even still, though, it's like, could have caused an accident.
And then we've all seen the videos of dudes taking a nap on the freeway in their Teslas that we just watched a video for that proves that these things aren't doing anything.
Yeah, they're not ready for that.
You know what other amazing technology, breakthrough technology exists to greatly reduce automotive deaths and environmental costs and all the other large economic costs of the individual car?
Home.
No. Building tall buildings close to each other and close to other things that people want to go to and use.
Yeah. Those places always end up sucking.
What? I don't think that the fact that they always I don't think that the idea that they always suck is the true explanation for what happened to destroy that model of the city from the 1870s to 1940s, 1950s.
It's a very dashing picture of you, by the way.
Why? Thank you. No, I'm not big on a lot of the wilder conspiracy theories, but this picture of the ideal life being in a detached home with a large plain patch of grass and external parking for multiple cars, long commute, not just to get to work, but to get anywhere that a human would want to be outside of the home. It's it just rings too true that this was a huge cultural coup pulled off by the growing automobile and oil industries.
Yep. That's all Elon is a front for is socialized all that stuff, you know.
The suburbs are just like this huge con.
Yeah. Oh, then he wants he wants us to go to Mars.
Yeah. Why don't we
go be in prison,
nice
full on Star Trek socialism prison on Mars. Sounds fun. No thanks.
Yeah. You know, I do gotta say though, it does seem interesting, like this space that's kind of being opened up to like fix the problem of, his technology cutting corners and causing all these issues. Like there was a song a while back. It was like kind of a hip hop type song, but it was called Jailbreak the Tesla. It's by Injury Reserve, kind of an obscure but somewhat popular group. But no, this is back in like 2017 or something. But it's like, it's interesting to think that if we started seeing too many of these issues cropping up, there's always going to be people who step in to try to solve those issues and like try to make the I guess
it's going to actually push innovation to do things better. His half-ass doing it is going to start, but it's like it's not his technology. It's old technology that he's just thrown in his cars as a gimmick to sell to his cars because he's got all this following that will just buy anything he sells. So it's like we almost don't need, that's kind of like what the point of this is. And that whole video is like, we almost don't need to be, humans are great at taking care of keeping themselves alive in a car. While there is accidents and stuff like that, it's usually because government has half-assed at doing our roads. Like there could be far safer roads, clear, easy, like you could get like an 11-year-old to figure it out, but like they don't want to spend the money to do it. We're still driving around on 100-year-old roads, and that's a big problem. Because big oil, has their hands in government, that we have cars that go 200 miles an hour for no reason. Like if we're not allowed to be going 80, why do they allow us to buy cars that go 200 miles an hour?
Yeah. Seriously.
So it's like, what are they really taking care of here? So the fact that we have all these and like, I'm a lifelong mechanic. I'm a car head. I love cars, way overpowered cars these days, and because of like California pushed all the car companies to make super gas efficient cars, right? So they made these super gas efficient cars, but now they're making them like, like your family sedan, normal family sedan. The normal Camry now has like 400 horsepower, and it's like super crazy. But they're needing to make more money because they're losing money to the efficiency of the cars because of the laws in California, control kind of the emissions laws for the rest of the world practically. So it's the same thing like when they legalized weed in California, like when it was before they legalized it, it was what's the word? Deregulated? No, decriminalized. We had like 12 years of like cops wouldn't take our weed from us, if they pulled us over. Oh, no problem, like because there were no laws on the fucking books for weed, right? And then you get all these numbnuts. I see legalized weed out front of Trader Joe's trying to get people. And a buddy of mine was one of these guys. And we have a video where we're arguing about this, where he's like, no, we've changed the world, man. We legalized weed. And I'm like, no, you ushered in new laws on the books to control weed, you fucking idiot. And like Californians completely got duped when we had the best weed laws in the world because there were no laws. There was no revenue from weed going towards the police. Now there is. Now you can be thrown in jail. Like there's all these laws now, and there's money. All the money that's made by the weed laws goes towards cops. And it's like, dude, you guys got to think about this shit and actually look at the things and like think about it, be like, should we change this? You know, it's the same kind of thing, you know, where like these laws are just like causing us to, and then just the psychopathic idea that we deserve new cars, like someone deserves a new car, like that's so crazy. Libertarian, these people hate when I talk about this shit. Like when you buy a new car, you're creating a new tax entity as if you are creating a new human, but that human is going to that car is going to immediately start generating revenue for the war machine, basically. And it's going to continue generating revenue for the war machine until they send that thing to the junkyard in 15, 20 years after it generates hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax revenues for the war machine. Like people, libertarians and anarchists, oh, I'm going to go buy a new Tesla. Like, are you insane? Jason Henza, dude, this guy every other day is telling people to buy Teslas or buy a Sprinter van or buy all this new stuff. Oh, people. And I talked to him about it. He's like, oh, families need reliable cars. And it's like, dude, do you know how unreliable new cars are these days? They make them to wear out in 50 and 60,000 miles. Like they aren't better now than they are before, you know, like, and it's just this like buy new stuff mentality. Like that's what you are most enslaved by. You know, it's not the government. You complain about the government all the time, but then you're making these fucking decisions that are taking your freedom away all day long, and you're blaming on the government. And it's like, no, dude, it's wild.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, what Benjamin Franklin quote about people who would trade liberty for a little security deserve neither. That's not just the obvious stuff where you tell the federal, like establishing the NSA or whatever, the Department of Homeland Security. It's not just I'm afraid of this foreign enemy, so I'm going to allow my government's police force to have much greater power. It is that, but it's also security in the sense of just having more stuff around, knowing that you're never gonna have to learn to take care of stuff yourself. Just the laziness that gets inculcated by a consumerist culture that also is going to inevitably have a cost in terms of your security. Like what you said about cars is very much true of home appliances.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's the culture of
make them, you know, they make your home appliances only go off a certain kind of gas. Yeah. And then it's overdoing it all the time. It's just like General Electric, like all their stuff is the most electric consuming thing in the house. And it's something you might not actually need. Like dryers. Almost like half the people in the country don't need a dryer. Like if somebody's Arizona, everyone's running their dryers. It's like, dude, put it outside on a line. It'll be dry in 5 minutes. It's 120 degrees outside.
Yeah. And you don't need that many clothes, and you don't need to wash them as often as people are trained to think, and just all of this kind of stuff.
We've lived in an RV for a year and a half, man. It's been wild looking at how little we consume. We buy, propane. Our generator makes electricity off propane. We have solar. Compared to people living in houses that just have endless everything. When you live in a city, you have this, there's this psychopathic waste going on. What's up, hard hat? Where they just set you up so you can just use as much as possible. And that's like a product of these tall buildings that are right next to each other that are at 100 years ago may have been an efficient way of setting things up, but it's probably not the case anymore.
I think we're going to have a big disagreement there.
And people being able to work at home and
putting people in nice places and enjoyable things close to one another, and having people used to walking and cycling is Yeah, that's part of the cure. That's not on the end. That's not on the enemy team.
It's like
the
Asia's the only place doing that shit too, practically.
Like if your
Like
your
where it's
main
left
problem
between
with a lot of fellow libertarians is a overly extreme love of technological innovations, then mine is my problem with them is a dislike of well designed cities, and I think a related dislike of being too close to too many other humans. There's that kind of strand that runs pretty strongly throughout libertarian culture, and it can be nice sometimes, but they're under this intense illusion that living way out in Idaho and having to drive their big old truck everywhere, and having to have these extremely inefficient roads constructed to go out to some place where there are only a couple of hundred people making any use of the roads, compared to good urban planning, compared to what a lot of East Asian and South Asian and European cities look like.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's like a lot of you see like the old villages of Europe that have been modernized, and there's like no room for cars anywhere. It's just all these houses that are kind of connected. You have to walk to get to your house. They have parking lots, but like it's just way more efficient, and it's way more conducive to having a healthy lifestyle, having to walk a little bit every day, or just not drive. And
you can be really individualistic and really libertarian, and and learn to have a good life, seeing thousands of people you don't know by name on your typical day. I don't get that. That's some sort of pathology of a few individuals that somehow got itself attached to the basic concepts of libertarianism. To be a radical individual, isolating yourself and your family from the horrors of the filth of the rest of humanity, trying to corrupt your own pure family of which you are the head. That overlap between paleoconservatism, I guess, and libertarianism is something I have a pretty big bone to pick with.
Oh yeah.
I think it's a lot of those people that have, looked into a little too many of the diabolical conspiracy theories, and they're thinking that like we're minutes away from just everything just going to chaos. So like they've dug in too deep on this idea that like, being isolated, that's the only way to be, and so you should put all your money into, being a prepper basically. Like that.
And they're exactly wrong. The best place to be in a civilizational collapse would be in a neighborhood block with several large buildings, so that you have some defensible structures, and you can assemble a platoon of 30 strong, able-bodied men in order to defend all the
like a cul-de-sac on a
women,
hill.
children, and elderly within that space.
Yeah, for sure.
Not your own little farmhouse with just one man, one woman, and 5
bugging out is going to be war. Like, like,
good luck
we
with
kind of
that.
talked about that last week with Hard Hat. Like the idea of going out somewhere and being in the middle of nowhere, and if something happens, still being able to be alone is just completely realistic. There's going to be so many people with that same idea that, and everybody's going to be super prepped, and everyone's going to be, have all guns. And it's like, you got wasteful personalities clashing when you can, stick around, like he said, and like, have a small community and to start over again.
The most vital people in a civilizational collapse sort of scenario are not going to be the people who the preppers think.
Yeah. All the zombie
they're
movies.
going to be the people who can quickly and effectively, peacefully organize groups of families into the sort of basic building block communities. People who have the skills that like good clergy and teachers and local politicians do of solving interpersonal conflicts and building, rebuilding civil bonds. The people who know how to do that are going to be able to find the groups of a couple hundred people that are able to keep each other around, reestablish, division of labor. And it's not going to be the single nuclear families like in their hold off with their guns and ammo trying to protect all their pantries full of canned foods.
Yeah. I haven't seen that many successful examples of communal living, especially in the United States.
Yeah, there's so much division. It's like, it's kind of a joke, but it's like, having a good like human resources sort of person to negotiate in the apocalypse, like might be a good idea, but it would come down to people being able to agree on principles and being able to like stomach living together, but still kind of having that prepper mindset, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like the little conflicts that could happen where like moral issues start to rise, like that's where you'll see a lot of issues start popping up. And like, yeah, with how trigger happy people can be and how hot headed people can be, especially when they're more high blood pressure, non-anti-inflammatory diet type people, have a lot of issues.
Reason number 4,287 to go vegan.
Yeah.
Your high inflammatory diet may make it more difficult for you to peacefully cohabit with others in a post-apocalyptic scenario.
Yeah. Very out there one, but it's pretty valid.
It puts you in fight or flight, makes you more aggressive. It's going to be less of a chance of getting along with people.
Yeah. People not being able to sit back and observe the situation without like jumping to conclusions and having to start static out of nowhere.
Yeah. Have you guys seen the keto lady, the keto what did she have? Stroke? The keto stroke lady?
Yeah.
Not yet. I think I saw something about that.
Yeah.
I don't
I didn't get a chance to watch
the video.
Did you?
I saw some Twitter X conversations. I haven't seen the video.
So she was like a keto influencer, like Beauty Past 50 or something is her name. Like, so she was like doing the whole keto thing, old lady beauty stuff. And then she had a stroke.
Hi there, I'm Beth with 50 Plus Beauty, and I'm here to discuss something kind of personal with you, and that is the progress that I've made in my way of thinking and in my lifestyle choices since I had my stroke. And as those of you who follow my channel, you may remember that on August 15th, about 4 months ago, just under 4 months ago, I had a stroke. It was about 5:30 in the morning. I was in the basement doing my weight routine, and all of a sudden my left side went numb. My face went numb on the left side. I couldn't look very good at that point, although that was the last thing I cared about at that moment. I ran up the stairs and said, "Oh, and I'm having a stroke. Call 911, call 911." And Alan had the foresight, as we were waiting for the ambulance, to say, "Beth, get your cell phone and record yourself having this stroke, because maybe you'll be able to help other women." And I did that, and I'm going to play the little segment that I made that morning of the stroke. The audio isn't good. I don't know why, but here I am the morning of the stroke. Okay.
See, I'm smiling halfway. I just had a stroke, probably a mild stroke, like a TIA. But I just had a stroke down in the basement. I was doing my arm weights on a bench, on an incline bench, and I was pushing my arm up in the air. I had just 15 pounds, which is not heavy. And unfortunately, my left arm started going numb. And then I thought immediately, maybe I was having a stroke. My left leg went numb.
And I was very fortunate because I immediately
By a
realized
waterfall
I
or
was having a
something?
stroke, got to the hospital, and again had that clot-busting drug. And within 2 to 3 hours of having had that drug, my face was back to normal. My left side wasn't numb anymore. I was one of the lucky ones who realized I was having a stroke right away. And in fact, just 3 days later on that Saturday, I made my first video about the stroke and the Be Fast. And if you haven't watched that, I hope you will, because in that video, I do a little education to all of my viewers out there, help them identify if they or a loved one is having a stroke in order to get them to the hospital right away. So hopefully they can also have that life-saving clot buster drug. Well, the doctors were amazed in the hospital that I had had a stroke because they said, Beth, you have none of the risk factors. You're slender, you're not overweight, diabetes, you don't have known heart disease, you work out, you eat well. At least they thought I ate well. Although
what are your cholesterol levels?
For the past 5 years, I had been on a very high-fat diet. Leading up to the stroke, for 4 years, I was on the keto diet, of which
is this woman
very high
4 years?
butter,
So this is like a
long-term
long-term example
in the
of someone
last
on
year leading
keto.
up to the stroke, I had gone to the very high saturated fat carnivore diet.
Has she ever
And
posted
quite
high
honestly, I had
cholesterol
gotten
levels
to the
and
carnivore by
praised
listening
them?
to social media
Or
influencers.
argue that they
I'd
were positive?
imagine she did. I mean, it's
There's a lot of
hard.
these guys have done that.
That's like the everyone
Low
does
cholesterol
that
myth.
stuff.
Yeah.
But it gets pretty interesting because she reaches out to all the other people that you talk to her.
Who seem to talk a good game. They seem to have studies that supported the carnivore diet. But since my stroke, I have done more research and I have found that those studies are quite lacking in terms of the carnivore diet. There are no long-term studies at all on the carnivore diet. And some of those social media influencers are actually trying to raise money for a documentary in support of the carnivore diet. But I would say, hey, slow down. Instead of saving money toward that documentary, save money toward a long-term study that will show the effects, the true effects in one's body of the carnivore diet. Because as someone like me can attest, what we eat is super important to our health. And I do believe now that high saturated fat actually does lead to heart disease. And I believe that is what I have. Obviously, I had a stroke, which is one of the elements of heart disease. You know, strokes, heart attacks, diabetes, that kind of thing. They're all kind of linked together. Maybe not diabetes, but all of those are lifestyle issues that can really be impacted by one's diet. And I will say that now, instead of all that meat and butter and cheese on the carnivore diet, I have now gone to a whole foods plant-based eating plan. However, I still need to get to a lower fat version of this plan, which I will do this coming Friday. And I will explain that to you in just a few moments. But I will tell you that, like many of you out there, I originally loved the carnivore diet. And about 2 weeks after I had that stroke, I had done some research and I found this one cardiologist who supported the carnivore diet. And I made that video 2 weeks after the stroke stating that I plan to remain on the carnivore diet. That was before I started to do more research on strokes in general. And in fact, the American Stroke Association gave me a horrifying statistic. They have found that 1 in 4 people that have a stroke are likely to have a second, usually more serious stroke the second time. And after what I went through, it was very important to me to do the research and to get on a program of health support that would keep me from ever having a stroke again, that would keep me heart healthy. And I will say that in that first video, I offered to reach out to Dr. Ken Berry because I wanted to get his take on this. I wanted to hear from other carnivore influencers. And with the exception of one influencer, Bella, the steak and butter gal, she did reach out to me and we did do a short video about my decision to remain carnivore. But none of the other influencers that are in the carnivore sphere reached out to me. And I know they knew about my video because how can you miss it? It had 100,000 views. And here I was in the thumbnail, you know, having had a stroke on carnivore. And I did try to get Dr. Ken Berry, but I emailed him several times and I was never able to get a response from him. And I would still like to have his response, quite honestly. And first, let me tell you that I had a life-threatening experience. So that made me jump in and do a lot more research than I would have had I just been going along on the carnivore diet. I was largely believing the things I was hearing, and they were kind of surface, but I knew a lot of people reported good results and I felt good on it, so everything was fine. But I am not saying that anyone out there should not do the carnivore if they want to do it. Every one of us is different, and we all have our own goals and we all have our own beliefs. And so please don't crucify me in the comments section if you're pro carnivore, because I'm not telling you need to go.
She feels like she has to say something because that group is so ravenous when it comes to this stuff. They flip out on people. Like, I did a video like reacting to a guy talking about his LDL levels and all this stuff, and how like he gained all this weight, and like his doctor's telling him he's crazy for continuing the diet, and like everyone, all his friends not talking to him anymore, and everyone talking shit in the comments on all his videos. And it's just like, it's pretty crazy, like how strong the groupthink is. And none of these people have anything to back any of, anything that they're saying, really.
Well, Dr. Mercola too, I sent you a video on that a while back, but he like basically turned his back on the whole keto diet, like, keto, carnivore, kind of the same thing, but he turned his back on it, and he started copyright striking people, anybody who was sharing a clip of him saying that he was no longer recommending it and breaking down why. He started trying to completely like wipe every instance of him saying that off the internet, and he was pretty successful, except for people on Rumble.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they don't like the inconvenient stuff getting out.
You know who he is?
Yeah. He's like the bald guy. He sells a bunch of supplements too, so he has a whole empire to protect of shit to sell.
Yeah, I think he kind of backpedaled on that, but people were speculating it was probably because he does have keto related sort of supplements. So of course he's got to like protect his bottom line. But yeah.
Oh yeah.
Bad. There was like he showed some study that was like a 30% increase in like all cause mortality or whatever for like being on keto, and then like 30% decrease in all cause mortality being on high carb, low fat. So that's kind of a common thing.
Yeah. So he used to be vegan, and then he went carnivore or something, and then he went back to being vegan.
No, I think Mercola was always kind of a like mainstream. Like he probably never really was. Guy. Yeah, he was never really pushing like vegan or anything.
Yeah, he was never.